Well, good morning to you and welcome live and nationwide from San Antonio. This is Road Across America from WOAI. I'm Ben Baldwin, your host on this early Wednesday morning, and here we go. We're starting it off right here, right now. 3 hours of conversation to come your way this morning on Road Across America. Got lots going on, lots to talk about. We certainly hope you'll join in with us. Whether you're at home or on the road, why don't you make the plans to join in? Drivers, if you're driving across the country or across the street, that's okay too. Take a break, walk around the truck, kick the tires, and join in the discussion with us. Will you do that? It's Road Across America. It is a Wednesday morning, and we want to hear from you. Well, peace in the Middle East. You know, it's been a lifelong dream of some folks. For others, maybe it has been a lifelong nightmare. Is the prospect for peace any closer to reality with the election of the Labor government in Israel? Will the Palestinians finally get their independent state? Will they first have to go through what is being called autonomy, and what does that really mean? And can peace be any closer to a reality? Well, our guest this morning on Road Across America will try to shed some light on this issue of autonomy and what's at stake. What do those Palestinians really want? Our guests this morning, Professor Hisham H. Hamid and Mark Barsanti. They are the authors of the Mideast Realities and an article in that newsletter that says Rabin's Deception, Autonomy for Palestinians. Professor Hamid and Mark Barsanti, your guests this morning on Road Across America, the Middle East, the subject of our discussion, and what the Palestinians are really interested in. You join in the discussion with us, 737-1200, the local number. Nationally, it's 1-800-383-9624. Pick up the phone, join in the conversation with us. And do it now. Traveling around the country this morning, okay? On your way to Atlanta, look for partly cloudy skies today and a high of 79. Boston will be partly cloudy with a high of 80, by the way. Traveling to Charlotte, partly cloudy and 86. Chicago, sunny and 77. Cleveland will be partly cloudy and 73. Dallas, 83 with some thunderstorms today. Denver should be sunny, though, with a high of 84. And if you're going to Detroit, partly cloudy and a cool 76 degrees.
It's that time again. Time for the wildest auction in the West, Saturday, August 29th at Boysville. WOAI is proud to be co-sponsor for the auction, which is Boysville's only major fundraising event of the year. Hi, this is Ed Chandler, inviting you to join me for all the auction action, starting that morning at 7:30 with a free breakfast for you bidders. After the meal, the auction gets underway. You'll be bidding on things like furniture, fishing and hunting trips, golf packages, a special collection of antique items, and much more, even longhorns. Again this year, WOAI is going to give you a little warm-up auction on Thursday the 27th. Listeners will be able to call in and bid on a dynamite San Antonio Spurs package consisting of tickets for 4 to see the Spurs playing the Lakers, the Bulls, and the Knicks in the arena, including dinner before each of the 3 games at the Arena Club. So be listening and ready to call in your bid throughout the day on the 27th. Then join us for the wildest auction in the West, Saturday the 29th at the Boysville Barns on Loop 1604 near Randolph Air Force Base. Sponsored in part by the Power of Information, WOAI.
Now, let's check on metro traffic. Okie doke. We'll check it if you're traveling in the West.
Thunder showers to
America from WOAI on this Wednesday morning. The Middle East problem. The problem, it's called, of the Palestinians. I don't know if that's a fair evaluation. It's a problem of the Middle East, and it also happens to include the Palestinians and, of course, the Israelis and the other Arab states around that particular area of the world. What is it that the Palestinians really want? What is autonomy? What is statehood? What is self-rule? Joining us this morning on Road Across America, Professor Hisham Ahmed. He teaches Middle East Studies at the University of North Dakota. He's vice president of the Association of Arab American University. By the way, he was born in a refugee camp in the West Bank. Mark Barsanti is also with us. He is a former Washington representative and chairperson of the World Jewish Congress, and he received his master's in international affairs at Princeton University. It's Road Across America. It's an early Wednesday morning, and gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben.
Glad to have you with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Let me first of all start off by asking you both, now in very simplistic terms and in the basis of international understanding, are we closer to peace in the Middle East with a Labor government in Israel than we were, say, 6 months ago with the Likud party? And Professor, why don't you start that off?
Well, I'm afraid that we are much closer to disaster than to peace. To the average person, particularly in the West, it does look like that we are closer to peace because of the ornamentations, attached to the whole process these days. Rabin seems to be more acceptable to Western public opinion, certainly more than Shamir, and certainly he is giving seemingly more positive signals to Western public opinion, but in actuality, Rabin is more pragmatic, he's more experienced as far as Western public opinion is concerned, and therefore he knows much better to deal with the West than the Shamir government. In actuality, the fact that he orchestrated the recent moves that he has undertaken ensures the subjugation of the Palestinian people basically forever if the process is to be continued.
Now, before you answer this, Mark, Mr. Barsanti, let me clarify something, Professor. I don't think I understand now. Are you saying, in a sense, after all, we know that Mr. Shamir said after he lost the election that it was his intention to drag out these peace talks for 10 years and to, eventually never accomplish anything, just to drag them out so he could continue to occupy the West Bank and Gaza with Jewish settlements. Are you saying that, in a sense, that Mr. Rabin is a much more cloaked or a much more secretive Shamir? Is that what you're saying, or that they're the same thing, just in different clothing?
Well, Shamir said it. Shamir said that he really he never intended to undertake a serious, peaceful peace process in the region. Right. He said it, and that came out clear after he lost the recent elections. However, Rabin doesn't say it. On the other hand, the historical records indicate that Rabin is certainly not different whatsoever from Shamir in terms of the goals he wants to achieve. They're basically representatives of one identity, yet wearing different masks.
Mr. Rosovsky, your comments on that?
Well, Hisham and I are friends, and we've had chances to talk about this before. I basically agree. I think it's really sad to see how the press portrays these issues in this country. After all, Mr. Rabin was prime minister in the 70s when the settlement problem was begun. It was begun by his government. Even when Labor was in opposition, they spent more years in a national unity government with the Likud than they spent in real opposition. And it was Mr. Rabin who was the defense minister for Mr. Shamir just a few years ago, talking about breaking the bones of the Palestinians. So just because the person comes with sweet smiles and says things, it's more important to look at the actual record of what that person and what that person's party stand for. And it's pretty clear what the attempt of the Rabin government is. They want the Palestinians to give up their struggle for self-determination. They want them to give up their plans for statehood. They want them to go and live on reservations like the American Indian lives on reservations. And they want them to be satisfied that they're not being expelled from the land, as the Likud government talked about. But most importantly of all, they want the American people to keep paying billions and billions of dollars in arms and economic assistance to make the Israeli state the strategic bastion of American power in the region. And unfortunately, our country is in the position of financing a brutal military occupation against the Palestinian people, even though we claim to be in the forefront of supporting democracy and self-determination. It's really a very ironic and tragic situation, and our politicians, unfortunately, mislead us a great deal.
Well, but gentlemen, in all fairness, now think about this for a second, and both of you jump in any time here, any place. Is it fair to make the assumption or to compare somebody to a record that may have existed 15 or 20 years ago? In all fairness, things have changed, people have changed, the world has changed.
We're not talking about 15 or 20 years ago. First of all, Mr. Rabin has done nothing any different than what his policies have been for the last 30 years. He has done nothing different. He continues to say there will be no Palestinian state. He continues to say there will be no negotiations with the PLO. He continues to say autonomy. This is the same autonomy that was talked about in the 70s, that was talked about right after the Six-Day War. The Palestinians have always said, autonomy autonomy is not our goal. Independence is our goal. We don't want to live under your subjugation any more than you want to live under our subjugation. So, fine and dandy. I would love nothing better than for Mr. Rabin to turn out to be the Charles de Gaulle of Israel. But there are no signs that that's about to happen.
Well, but you haven't given him really the opportunity yet, have you, Mr. Barsanti?
Of course we've given him the opportunity.
Well, I mean, it's only been a few weeks or even a few months since he's been in office, and isn't there a certain reality here? Now,
the burden of proof when you've had a long history, he's 70 years old, the burden of proof is on the person to show that he has changed, not on the analyst to hope that there will be change.
Well, but Professor, too, isn't it reality in a sense that Mr. Rabin has to deal with his own domestic political situation? I mean, after all, while he did win the election, there is still obviously that right-wing sentiment that exists in Israel that for political purposes, in it's a fact of life, it must be appealed to.
Well, let me just add one other thing. In addition to what Mark said about Rabin, Shamir was the architect of the subjugation of the Palestinian people in practical terms. He built settlements, he undertook very oppressive measures against the Palestinians, confined them indeed to reservations. Now Rabin came to complement what Shamir's policies. Rabin seems to be the architect for Western public opinion, to convince Western public opinion that indeed these are the measures to take now. Of course, any successful policymaker will have to take into consideration the aspirations, the demands, the desires of his own people. And certainly Rabin is doing that by virtue of the fact that he felt that the gap between the United States and the Israelis is being widened. He indeed figured out that the best way out of the situation is to give seemingly more positive signals than the Shamir government to the United States, and certainly the United States bought that. But of course, the whole process is an interrelated process. The United States is not an isolated party. The United States, before the Israeli elections, the Bush administration, was instrumental in making it clear to Israeli public opinion that the best future for the Israelis is to have the Rabin government.
Yeah.
But let me try to focus our thoughts for a moment. Two things we're overlooking. Sure, there are problems within the Israeli political system that all Israeli political leaders have to address. But let's address our own political system. We're Americans. How come we Americans are spending $4 billion a year on a country that has about 4 million people, and how come we are allowing them, after a generation, to militarily occupy another country against decades of Security Council resolutions and against the entire world, because it's usually the U.S. and Israel alone that vote one way in the UN, and everybody else votes the other way.
But Mark, you know the answer to that as well as I do. I mean, up until just a few years ago, I think our support and our supply and our money, while we talked about it being the only country in the Middle East with a democracy, and we gave all those kind words to it, in reality, I think it's fair to say that the real reason was because at a time when the Cold War was brewing, when we started all this, it offered us an opportunity for a spot in the Middle East. I
don't think that's the real reason. I think the real reason is that we have a peculiar political situation in this country, and that political situation allows pressure groups to use money and pressure to create a situation in Washington where any politician who has stood up on this issue over the years has been quickly shot down. It's no secret. There's just like on gun issues with the National Rifle Association, on this issue there's an Israeli Jewish lobby, very powerful, always vigilant, always pressuring and cajoling, always making it very difficult for anyone who wants to discuss these issues. Yet here we've just gone to war to liberate supposedly Kuwait. We're now telling the Iraqis they can't fly over part of their own country because we're concerned about the rights of the Shiites. And yet when it comes to a military occupation, and anybody who goes there can see it with their own eyes, that's gone on for a generation.
I'm almost afraid to make this statement or to ask this question. but are you comparing, in a sense, Saddam Hussein's torture and his abuse of the Shiite minority in southern Iraq to the kind of treatment the Israelis are giving the Palestinians?
Absolutely. We're talking about a brutal military occupation. We're talking about torture and murder, which is documented in the Israeli press all the time. Now, why, for instance...
There is even, I would venture to say there is even no comparison. I mean, the two situations even are not comparable, but I think Mark's point is well taken.
I don't doubt at all, Professor, that sure there have been abuses by Israeli authorities of Palestinians, and I sit here on many mornings and complain about the treatment, but I don't think you can compare it to the kind of torture and the kind of subversion that Saddam Hussein imposes on his people.
Well, if I may, as I said, the two situations cannot even be compared. It is one thing to talk about the torture by one government of certain segments of its own people, as is the case in Iraq by the Iraqi government towards the Shias in the south, and even that, in my view, is highly exaggerated because certainly the media, the establishment have a strong interest in portraying the Iraqi government as unethical, as brutal, etc., etc., etc.
I understand.
Now, it's another thing. It's another thing, however, to talk about a foreign occupying power, which is the case of the Israelis, subjugating systematically, regularly, constantly, in every way imaginable, the Palestinian people, confining them to concentration camps, brutalizing them. Look at how many Palestinians have been killed in the last 5 years alone. The ratio is horrendous. How many people have been...
Well, Hisham, let me jump in and let me just give one statistic. Since the Intifada began less than 5 years ago, if you multiplied the small size of the Palestinian population by the larger size of the American population, if this occupation were taking place in America, over 150,000 Americans would have been shot to death or beaten to death or tortured to death by the occupying forces. Now, Americans don't realize the size of the magnitude of this occupation because it's largely hidden from us. The cameras are not allowed to go there. It's a closed military area. The Palestinians are living in villages. But I would think it would be easier for Americans to understand the Nazi armies rolled into France and occupied France. And they set up a puppet government. And then, of course, de Gaulle's forces liberated France. In a sense, the Israeli army has rolled into the rest of Palestine and is occupying through brutal military force about 2 million Palestinians. And we Americans are in the unfortunate complicitous situation of providing the political cover and the financial and military might to make this continue. And that's why there's so much hatred in certain circles of the Middle East for what the American empire is doing.
Yeah, and but that hatred goes on both sides, Mark. The hatred that exists among Jewish settlements and Jewish citizens, not necessarily the settlements in northern Israel, are all over the country who have become victims of violent terrorist attacks.
Oh my God! I don't know where you're getting your statistics, but the number of Palestinian women and children that have been killed by Israeli terror is so much greater than the number of Jewish women and children that have been killed that the numbers are incomparable.
I'm not trying to get into a body count here.
No, but you seem only sensitive. You seem only sensitive to the Israeli problem.
If I may.
Yes, Professor.
If I may, please. All it takes is to make, I would say, a quick visit to a city inhabited by Israelis, let's say Tel Aviv, and a city inhabited by Palestinians, let's say Ramallah. It would leave no doubt whatsoever to the observer that Israelis living in Tel Aviv are enjoying a normal life with, I would say, absolute safety as much as a state can provide and as much as people can enjoy.
Sure.
When you visit a Palestinian city, all you will see are foreign soldiers, Israeli soldiers, teenagers armed with machine guns, made here in the United States, patrolling streets, preventing people from looking outside their windows, outside their doors, outside their houses, not able to move whatsoever. And I think, proportionately speaking, in the conflict, it is quite abundantly clear that there is a victim and there is a victim.
I don't question that at all. I know that that's the case. I've traveled in Ramallah. I've traveled in Tel Aviv. I've been in numerous Arab cabs that have traveled from the West Bank into Jerusalem or Tel Aviv and witnessed the kind of assault that the cab driver has to deal with in police checkpoints or going through, just being stopped every time because his license tags indicates he's from, the West Bank. Yeah.
Exactly.
The kind of trivial kind of crap that he has to put up with.
The two situations are indeed are not symmetrical whatsoever. They are not. They're not the same. Certainly, some Israelis have encountered hardships.
But
the fact of the matter is that the hardships they have encountered are the product of policies engineered over the years by Zionist and Israeli policymakers who have been willing to let some of their people suffer in order to achieve colonial goals.
It's interesting, gentlemen. The other night, I got a chance to watch, first of all, I watched the network, an American network coverage of President Bush's meeting with Rabin and the report of the allowing of the $10 billion loan guarantee to go through. And then ABC did an interesting thing on their overnight news program. They gave us the first 15 minutes of the Israeli television English version broadcast of that same Bush-Rabin meeting and what transpired. Now, in the American version, they talked about the concessions being made by Rabin in terms of the settlements on the West Bank and how President Bush had finally decided it was appropriate and that we could go ahead and release or guarantee that $10 billion loan. But on the Israeli broadcast, it was pointed out at the very beginning that Prime Minister Rabin made absolutely no concessions to the American president to gain the guarantee of that $10 billion.
In fact, Rabin has allowed enough settlements to go forward so that the population of Israeli settlers by the end of the century will be 50% greater than it is now. He canceled some of the plans for settlements that Likud had rushed to set up before they lost power. But the realities on the ground are that the Israelis really don't have money or settlers to fill all of the settlements that the Likud was planning to start in the first place. So it's like going into a shop and the shopkeeper sets the price 10 times higher than he really expects to get. And then when the price gets down to only 5 times higher, the purchaser feels, oh, hey, I'm getting a good deal. But the shopkeeper, of course, knows that he had already inflated the price so much that whatever he gets, he wins.
Well, and ultimately, that may be the doom, or that may be the factor that brings about at least a forced conciliation, or at least some form of understanding between the Palestinians and the Jews in that country. Before you comment on that, let me take a break, and when we come back, I'll restate the question, all right? Road across America from WOAI. You join in with us. 737-1200 is the number locally. Nationally, it's 1-800-383-9624. Professor Hisham Ahmed, your guest this morning. Also with us, Mark Barsanti. We're talking about the Palestinian issue in the state of Israel in the Middle East. You join in the discussion with us. Let's hear from you right now.
So you want to buy a home, new or pre-owned? Before you do, call 822-8900. That's Alamo Inspection Service. They check everything for you to make sure you are really getting a good deal, a good buy. Everything from the electrical, cooling, heating system to the appliances, the foundation, every single thing. And then they give you a detailed written report, even the small things in your home. By having them inspect the home before you sell a home, you can find out in advance any areas that need replacing or repair and be sure that the buyer's inspectors are being accurate with you. If you're building a brand new home, you don't have time or maybe the knowledge to attend to every step of construction. Alamo Inspection Service can inspect the foundation, the framing, mechanical, rough-in inspections, and a final inspection for you. Gene and Bill Moore, total of 55 years of construction experience, are Alamo Inspection Service. Experienced inspectors licensed by the state of Texas and Texas Real Estate Commission. These guys do a good job. Give them a call, 822-8900.
This is J. Philip Anderson. Let me ask you a question. Are you looking for a roofer who has years of knowledge and experience? Well, then you need to meet Jerry Sanford. Do you want a choice of brand name shingles like Owens Corning, Elk, GAF, and others? Well, once again, that's Jerry Sanford. Do you want an outfit that'll pick up the trash and clean up after every job? Well, you guessed it. That's Jerry Sanford. Now, I know that's 3 questions, but then Jerry Sanford's about 3 times as good as most anybody else. Well, Jerry even does built-up gravel roofs for flat-top buildings. And Jerry Sanford always installs new felt paper, new metal valleys, and eave strippings, whether your roof needs repairing or replacing. Sanford Roofing gives you the top quality, truly professional job you're looking for, and the price is right. Jerry's a longtime member of the Safe Referral Network, and he even accepts Visa, MasterCharge, and American Express. Call Jerry Sanford so you can enjoy the rains. 621-2630, 621-2630. Jerry Sanford Roofing and Remodeling.
In sports, in Major League Baseball yesterday in the American League, Cleveland over Minnesota 8-1. The White Sox beat Texas 3-0. Toronto clobbered Milwaukee 12-1. Boston shut out California 8-0. Seattle 8, Baltimore 3. The Yankees over at the A's 7-3. And Detroit defeated Kansas City 5-1. Now let's check on metro traffic down in the south.
A number of accidents slowing your drive in Dallas, Texas at this hour. This Road Watch America report brought to you by the Trucker's Monthly Guide.
In Dallas, Texas this morning, a multitude of problems. Eastbound Interstate 30 at East Grand, an injury accident there. Another one on the Northwest Highway between U.S. Highway 75 and Bodacker. And they're still working to clear a multi-vehicle accident southbound on U.S. 67 at the I-35 merge. 4 wreckers have been called to that scene, including 2 heavy duties. For Road Watch America, I'm Lyndon Jocelyn.
If you're traveling Interstate 45, watch for fog and rain between Dallas, Texas and Madisonville. On Interstate 35, there's fog and rain between Temple, Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Oklahoma City, and Wichita, Kansas. If you're traveling Interstate 59 this morning, watch for fog between Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Road across America from WOAI, the Israeli-Palestinian issue in the Middle East, the subject of our discussion. You join in the conversation with us. Let's hear from you right now. And let's go to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, and talk to Steve. Steve's on the cellular phone. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, Steve.
Yes, it seems to be that in the Mideast as well as around the world, we've had international tensions for some time. We have different groups of people who for centuries, except for America, where we have a melting pot, it seems like most countries have ethnic groups or cultures or civilizations through the centuries that have fought over various customs and disputes. I just have a question for your guests. Why can't we come together and make agreements where we can have territories? It seems to me that even in Israel, there's a small area there for the Jews, there's a small area for the Palestinians, and it seems like that the Arab countries around it, there's a very large area. Why can't there be some kind of territories if people don't want to live together and we can't force people to live together? In America, we seem to have a melting pot that's been very difficult. We've worked through the process. So can your guest answer that question?
All right, that's a very interesting question. Mr. Rosovsky, why don't we start with you on that?
Well, you know, we're dealing with the old world, and the old world people have claims to certain territory. The Palestinians don't want to go live in Cyprus any more than the Israelis want to go live in Syria. What's at stake is allowing them each their self-determination in what is their legitimate home. They each have a claim. It's a different kind of claim. Here in this country, we have a different outlook, a different history. Of course, we took the Native Americans and we dealt with them. We put them off on their reservations. We had our own civil war, which is still the bloodiest war in our own history when we couldn't settle our own problems. My own view would be that the West, not just the United States, but it was the French and the British, of course, as well, the West has purposely created tensions and purposely played one group off against the other and purposely divided the area into false boundaries precisely in order to help control the region and make it possible for Western colonialism and imperialism to dominate. Even the problem between Iraq and Kuwait. Everybody in the Middle East knows that Kuwait is historically part of Iraq. Everybody knows that. The question is what to do about it.
If I may add just one quick thing to this. Historically, it's a well-known fact that in the Middle East, before the 20th century, peoples of different nationalities, different religions, different colors, different orientations lived harmoniously together. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, particularly in Palestine, lived harmoniously together, while Jews were discriminated against in the West, including the United States in the 19th century and in the early 20th century. Only until Western colonialism came to play an instrumental role in dividing the region into segments, into principalities, into ethnic groups, etc., 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 in order to conquer the region. The principle of divide and conquer was the operative principle that was utilized by Western powers in order to control the region. There is no reason why people in the Middle East cannot do that, but at the same time, one cannot fantasize about the situation there and isolate the external influences that are being brought upon by outside powers in the region.
But you know, Professor, and let me get your comment on this, and then you too, Mr. Rosovsky. Yeah, it's very easy, and Lord knows there is enough of a reason to blame Western colonialism for every problem that exists in the world, and I guess to some degree there may be some truth in that. But when it comes down to the bottom line, I mean, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, their own Arab brethren have been pretty brutal to them as well. Is that not true?
Well, you know, you're absolutely right, but at the same time, I would put this in perspective. I mean, you're right. It sounds easy just to blame Western colonialism for all the ills of the region. I mean, of course, there are internal. There are reasons that are internally intrinsic to the region that one can think of to try to figure out why the conflicts in the region that exist today do exist. But in terms of the Palestinians and the Arab world, one thing that is severely misunderstood in the West is the nature of the Arab political system. The Arab governments are not representative of their own peoples, and therefore whatever ties they have are ties primarily to the West. I can think of no example where there has been an attempt at change for democracy or liberalization of political life, of trade, etc., etc., etc. in the Arab region, where it was not obstructed militarily and politically by the West. One can think of the example in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Egypt, etc., etc., etc. There is not one single Arab regime that represents the will of its own people.
Well, you know, that's interesting, and I think Jordan may be the most prime example of that. Isn't that true?
Indeed.
Yeah, and look at what happened in Kuwait. Here we talked about going in to defend a country and hope that it would democratize itself, but we haven't really pushed very hard for democracy in Kuwait, have we?
There is more oppression in Kuwait today than before the crisis of August 1990. I mean, if you look at the situation in Kuwait, what you have is a tribal regime. It's a principality. It's a city-state, basically, reminiscent of ancient times. This is a regression of history. This is a regression of human history to have an emir who spent basically all of the time during the Gulf crisis partying,
in a hotel suite in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any comments on that, Mr. Barsanti?
Well, you know, we're covering a great deal of ground tonight. I believe originally you called us because the Mideast Realities newsletter.
Well, I want to get to that. Yeah, I want to get to that.
Right. I mean, there's a misunderstanding in this country, which is why many of us came together who are Jewish and formed the Jewish Committee on the Middle East. We now have Jewish professors at over 175 universities all over the country and thousands of other American Jews, and we simply have said to ourselves, at this time in history, we have to be for justice, for fairness, and for equality, and that requires us to speak up on behalf of Palestinian rights. If this were 40 or 50 years ago, most of us would have been doing everything we could to help the remnants of Jewry escape Europe, and we probably would have been running the British blockades and getting Jewish immigrants to go to Palestine. But at this particular time in history, fairness and justice and conscience requires us to say this military occupation has to end, and it isn't going to end with more tricks, semantic tricks about autonomy or self-rule or 5-year plans. Let's face it, Rabin has been working closely with Shamir most of his life. He was the defense minister for the former prime minister.
Oh, but you can't really call them very cozy buddies in that relationship.
Not personally.
No.
Not personally.
Well, not even politically. Not even
yes,
politically.
absolutely. You've got the Likud and Labor are two sides of a coin, and we have one of the experts on that. Hisham has studied this and written about this for a long time.
Let me ask the question that I think is the focal point of the articles that you two gentlemen wrote. And it's the question of all the discussion about autonomy that's going on for the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And you criticize that as being a subterfuge. And I understand why. I mean, the goal is for an independent state for Palestinian people. I understand that. I think, now, maybe this is making a big assumption on my part, but I think most of the people in Washington do as well. But you can't really jump from an occupied territory and from an area where there is so much distrust and hatred to statehood overnight. Can you?
I really think that's a false argument. We're not talking about overnight at all. We're talking about 100 years. We're talking, the statehood issue has been on the agenda of the United Nations ever since the United Nations was created. In fact, the partition resolution that the Israelis claim as their legitimacy stated specifically that the Palestinians were also to have a state. Mm-hmm. So it's really another argument that the Israelis throw out, which is disingenuous, which is dishonest. The Palestinian people, anyone who goes over there now, knows that they are perfectly capable of conducting their own affairs. But I'll tell you, the Americans, the Israelis, and
it's not a question.
Let me finish.
Okay,
the Americans, the Israelis, and many of the Arab regimes, they don't want Palestinian statehood. Palestinian statehood would be a democracy. The Palestinians are far more evolved politically than most of the Arab countries. But let me also just throw out a phone number, because we have copies of the newsletter that we sent to you, we faxed to you, and we'll be glad to send them to any of your listeners. All they have to do, and they can call 24 hours a day, it's a computer, just give your name and address, and the number is 202-362-5266. That's 202-362-5266. We'll send them a whole copy of the newsletter.
Go ahead, Professor. Let me get your comments.
Commenting on the article, if the autonomy plan were to be a culmination of the intent to establish a statehood, that is one thing. But certainly the autonomy plan is a culmination of the intent to subjugate the Palestinian people, is to indeed confine the Palestinians to limitless suffering, to limitless oppression. The autonomy plan, or the whole subject of autonomy, came about as early as 1923 by Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was an ardent, hardcore Zionist, a revisionist Zionist, a school of thought to which belongs Shamir and Begin and others. And basically the way he put it, that the best way to effectuate the oppression of the Palestinian people is to drive them against the wall. Mm-hmm. There is no other way around it. The net result of it will be autonomy. Now, of course, the Camp David Accords were brought about by the Carter administration, Sadat, and Begin himself. And of course, to the average person, it looked like a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And now what is happening is, let the Palestinians sell out their right to have rights, their right to have the right to self-determination, to independently govern themselves, to independently choose their own representatives, and let them be content with certain ornamentations, just certain decorative appearances, certain decorative rights, okay, which would seem to be more positive than the suffering that has existed for the past 5 years. But when you look at it, in 1948, Palestinians have lost the right, or have lost land. They have lost many lives. Many hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their country. Mm-hmm. But now, if the autonomy plan is to succeed, and I don't think it will, it would really mean that Palestinians will lose the right to sovereignty, to statehood, and they would be agreeing to it.
Well, but now, I think under the plan that you just stated, I think that's true. But under real political realities that exist today, Professor, I mean, you can't expect a jump from the situation that exists in the Middle East today to statehood in that kind of progression? Don't they have to go through a period of autonomy or self-rule or something, with the ultimate goal being, and I would assume somehow written in stone, and I don't know if that's possible or not, with the ultimate goal being statehood?
Well, if the ultimate goal is statehood, that would be certainly something, but certainly the ultimate goal is not statehood. The ultimate goal is the deprivation of Palestinians of statehood, and that is clearly stated. Rabin, on more than one occasion, has stated that he will not allow a Palestinian state to be created. The Bush administration has on more than one occasion stated it explicitly that it is opposed to the establishment of a Palestinian state. The Arab government certainly cannot be counted on to support the Palestinian state, the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Now, wait a minute. Has the U.S. government really stated that position? I thought we were in favor of the ultimate solution to the problem being Palestinian statehood.
I can think of no statement by...
I'm thinking of the Camp David Accords now.
Well, even the Camp David Accords, actually the Camp David Accords are perhaps the clearest document on the subject. The Carter administration referred to Palestinian political rights, and that of course is very, very, very ambiguous because it is divorced from the context of recognizing Palestinian national rights. But even since the Carter administration, not a single American official that I can think of has agreed to the establishment of a Palestinian state. To the contrary, not only that they have opposed the establishment of a Palestinian state, they have expended every effort, financially by supporting the Israeli regime, politically by supporting the Israeli regime, morally, even militarily, to prevent the Palestinians from establishing an independent state. And that's what the autonomy plan is all about.
I only have about a minute and a half left, but let me get this last question in. Shamir and Rabin, they don't live in a vacuum. It seems to me they understand, too, the problems, the ideas, the aspirations of the Palestinians. It seems to me as grown men, too, they know that they can't subject and kill all the Palestinians. Ultimately, they know that this, it seemed to me, just as a practical person, that ultimately they know that they have to reach some sort of solution. I mean, so, I mean, is that just far-fetched on my part? Am I being naive, Mark?
It would be nice to believe that, but I'll tell you what I think they believe. I think they believe that with the help of the United States, they will be able to make sure that this issue is not resolved. They will be able to continue to expand throughout the territories. They will be able to continue to push the Palestinians out and to demoralize them. And I think in many cases they ultimately plan to help, possibly help in a revolution in Jordan, and call Jordan Palestine, which they talk about with some openness.
Well, I understand
there in Israel.
that. I think you're right. Professor, your comments on that?
Well, you know, it is really interesting to think, I mean, certainly they understand that there are Palestinian grievances. They understand that very, very well, perhaps more than, you know, public opinion in the West does, because they live the reality there. It is Rabin, you know, who ordered the killing of Palestinians, the wounding, the breaking of bones of Palestinians. So he understands that, but he also understands, being an ideologue in his own way, that there is a way out of the situation, which is basically to try to pacify the Palestinians, to try to subjugate the Palestinians, and make the Palestinians accept their own subjugation. After all, I mean, it is true that no single people can be killed in totality. The American Indians were not, but they were confined to reservations.
Let me just mention again,
once
that
again,
anyone
give the number, please.
Anyone who would like to get the newsletter, just call 202-362-5266. Leave your name and address, and we'll be glad to send it out to you. And thank you very much for this opportunity this evening.
Well, indeed, thank you very
Professor
much.
Ahmed, thank you, and Mr. Brzezinski, thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
It's Road Across America from WOAI.
WOAI urges you to mobilize.